Welcome to the channel for the first time viewers. Welcome back for my existing subscribers. Today I'm going to shed some light on my experience in switching from my AMD Ryzen 2700X or Ryzen 7 2700X to a Intel i7 9700K. I got a friend that I work with that has always been on Intel. I think he's running like a 87 or a 7700K now. And he's always told me that it was better for gaming. And whenever I watch benchmark videos, it's kind of like always shown to be the case in most scenarios. I'd say in like 90% of the case, where the Intel CPUs always had better performance. So whenever I look at some of the content creator side of things, it looks like the AMD always gets the win. So, and for price to performance, AMD even now is still a better deal. You just get more money for the performance that you are getting and with the price you pay. So like this CPU, I needed to get an all-in-one cooler, so it made a lot of sense to just transition, because it's only a $30 difference. But usually you'd have the $30 difference plus your cooler, so you maybe talking about like my cooler was $70. So maybe right there, that's about $100. So that would have been a big jump for close in certain situations on paper. But this is gonna be about the experience. So far, the content creation side of things is a little bit worse, I would say, on Intel. Like I noticed that my OBS was kind of stuttering. It's probably because this is an 8-core 8-thread CPU, and the other one was 8-core 16-thread. Plus AMD is just better on like workstation tasks, so I think that might have something to do with it. And the gameplay though it's just insane. It was crazy. Like the other day I was playing Siege and I got an RTX 2080, and I think the highest I got on my AMD was about 290, 300 FPS. So which is really high. But in a similar situation, I actually hit 400 FPS on Siege. It just blew my mind with this 9700K. The other thing too is it's the first time I've officially switched out every single part of my pre-build. I've switched out the CPU, did that first. I've switched out the RAM, what else? Power supply, hard drives, you name it. So literally the only thing that's left is the case, and that's it. But to add to that, it's kind of like one of those things where the last thing I had not changed was the motherboard, because I had always been using the Ryzen series, so there was never a reason to change the motherboard. And to that extent, it's actually really cool. This, I know with the Intel boards, they go back a couple generations and forward like one generation, but the Ryzen, ever since Ryzen has come out, like I have a B350 board, it's actually compatible with the new Ryzen CPUs all the way up to the 3900X. Yeah, 3900X? Yeah. Which is pretty crazy, you know. It's the Ryzen 9 3900, yeah, 3900X, which is the highest end Ryzen right now. There's gonna be like a 3950 that's gonna be a workhorse that comes out later this year. But overall, if you're making a build now and you're not going with a stock cooler, I would still recommend the AMDs, just because the performance was really good. And then on the third generation Ryzen, like the 3000 series, the performance gap has been closed a lot. And that's why I had that decision to go with. I didn't have the best motherboard to begin with, because the pre-build came with like a B350 Bazooka, which is like an entry-level board, like just no frills, just it does what it does. But certain things just can't happen with that board. So I was looking at either a 3700X or 3700X with a new motherboard, but I could have gotten it later, or because the cost was so close, I could have just swapped over and switched to Intel and got the board now. So that's the one I ended up rolling with. And yeah, I have to say I'm not disappointed so far, especially when it comes to the gaming experience. Battlefield 5 has definitely less hiccups. I used to have a ton of stutters, like a lot of stutters with my AMD CPU, but I have no stutters now. I maybe have like one stutter a day. I don't know if that's attributed to the patch, but I did play it, you know, before Marita came out, that new map. And I didn't play it until after, like I switched my motherboard, the map came out, and then I played Battlefield like that night. And I noticed just everything was a lot more smooth. I can usually stay around the 170 to 200 FPS range. Something was up with my AMD, like I'm telling you, like I could be down in low settings and it would be at like 90 FPS. It made zero sense. So something was up with the way that it was something wrong with the game, I think. I don't think it had anything to do with the actual processor, because it didn't make sense. Because if I went up to Ultra, I'd still be at like 70 FPS or 90 FPS. It just didn't make sense to be at like 77 FPS on low. And I was on DX12, RTX was off, I think what happens is on the back end, it was turning it back on. But that's enough about Battlefield. Mainly the game I play is Siege. Madden has always been pretty stable, so Madden 20 is a pretty stable game. Nothing bad to say there. Insurgency Sandstorm with maxed out settings, I can get about 100, it's like 110, 115 FPS on the low side. But on the high side, it's up to 200. So most games are just topping out at much higher frames per second, which is very interesting. So yeah, if you could spare the extra change and you want to go with the best gaming performance, I would say roll with Intel. But if you want the best bang for your buck, then I would say go with the AMD. Also, like I was saying, for the content creators, I think the AMD is going to be the way to go. It could have just been a one-off situation, but I just noticed that my OBS had just been stuttering at my current settings. I noticed it was stuttering a lot more. Usually I use Shadowplay, which has almost no impact on the gameplay, but there's a new profile in OBS that pretty much mimics Shadowplay. So I've been using that, and it's literally like no performance hits in the game. Like, I can't tell. It's within like 5 FPS. When you're like in the 170, 180 range, you can't tell the difference of 5 FPS because it's not always the same. Like sometimes with recording completely off, you still lose about 5 FPS, so you can't even tell. You know what I mean? But overall, like I said, content creators, bang for buck, Ryzen 37. Not 37, the Ryzen 3600 is really good for the gamers. 3700 is really good for the creators. And then if you just want the best gaming performance, like literally the top tier gaming performance with very good everything else, then I would say roll with the Intel. Alright, hopefully this video helped you out. For anybody that's curious about like the Intel to AMD or AMD to Intel switch, the hardest part for my motherboard was just seating it. It wasn't very difficult, but once you've never done it, it's like one of those things that once you've never done it, it's just one of those things that can be intimidating because there's a lot of wires, and then these little prongs that control the case buttons. When I was plugging that in, I didn't plug them in all the way properly, so that was an interesting experience. But there's a little map on there that kind of shows you how they're supposed to be plugged in. So after I redid everything, it actually went pretty smooth. But overall, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and you guys take it easy. I'll catch you in the next one.